All right, we'll get going in just a little bit here. If folks are joining us right now, we're gonna wait about 2 minutes and let the room fill up, and then we'll go ahead and kick off the webinar. Awesome. Good to see you, Marissa.
Hey, Stephen, thank you.
All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. So first of all, thank you all so much for being here for our webinar about making a business case for fleet electrification in 2026. So this is the agenda for today's presentation. We'll start off with some introductions to the team and the presenters here. I'm going to be talking about the Breaking Bears Collaborative's Winter Accelerator. Then the Environmental Defense Fund will talk about electrified total cost of ownership. Skanska will talk about their EV fleet operations in action. We'll discuss some upcoming programming, and then we'll have some time set aside for Q&A. All right. So I am Steven Alaman. I am a program manager for Breaking Barriers Collaborative. I focus on medium and heavy duty fleet electrification here. And I will hand it off to Marissa Nixon, who is an analyst, or I'll just maybe just say hello, Marissa. She's an analyst for the Zero Emission Truck Initiative at the Environmental Defense Fund.
Hey, everyone, great to see you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And then we also have Stevn Clem, who is the Senior Vice President of Project Planning and Sustainability for Skanksa.
Good to see everybody.
All right, so a little bit of background about Breaking Bears Collaborative. Breaking Bears Collaborative's mission is to support businesses in the Pacific Northwest and help them accelerate their efforts for electrifying their fleets. Breaking Bears Collaborative was founded by 5 amazing organizations, including the Washington Building Back Black Alliance, um, Clean and Prosperous Institute, Oregon Business for Climate, the Way Foundation, and Climate Solutions. Breaking Barriers Collaborative's work is supported by all of these incredible organizations and community partners. And we really can't thank these organizations enough for their continued support. And we also owe a lot of appreciation to the folks that are supporting our work, such as you all, by attending webinars like this one. I want to take a moment to talk about the Fleet Electrification Accelerator. This program is Breaking Barriers Collaborative's program with the highest participation to date. The accelerator simplifies EV adoption by equipping businesses with trustworthy resources, a network of experts, and enables them to create cost-effective electrification plans and put them into action. One of the most exciting parts of the accelerator is the connection to a cohort of peer organizations that are also working to electrify their fleets kind of simultaneously, and they can kind of share notes with each other, and it's a great learning environment because of that. And then additionally, all of the amazing organizations that are graduates from the Electrification Accelerator, including Stevn Clem's organization, Skanksa, who we'll hear from later in this discussion. The accelerator has a wide range of participants, and we've been able to support fleets as small as 1 vehicle, all the way up to fleets as large as 10,000 vehicles. So wide range. We're happy to talk to anyone with any fleet about participating in the accelerator. So we have the Winter Accelerator, or the Winter Cohort, is coming up in 2026. This program is designed to allow for easy learning of all the material. All of the sessions are recorded, and the price is based on the fleet size. So if you have a small fleet, the barrier to participate is really low. And if you have a larger fleet, the cost is actually still very reasonable. So definitely reach out to us if you have any questions or interest in participating in the Winter Accelerator. You can register today for an upcoming informational webinar about the accelerator, and you can speak directly to program managers about how the program could help you and your organization electrify your fleet. All right, time for us to get into today's discussion focusing on the business case for fleet electrification. Um, Given the recent shift in available federal incentives for electric vehicles, we've heard a lot of concerns around the affordability of electric vehicles. And this motivated our team and the panel of speakers today to host a discussion to highlight the funding support that still remains available to fleets who are doing this work, and then to dive into some of the vehicle segments where electric vehicles are showing a promising return on investment, even if incentives are not available. With that being said, financial support for fleet electrification and charging infrastructure is still often available through local utility programs and local government agencies. I'm going to take a brief moment to highlight some of the examples of state incentives that are coming soon in Oregon and Washington. Breaking Barriers Collaborative has recently partnered with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality and Oregon Department of Transportation to provide a sneak preview of Oregon's new EV infrastructure and incentive programs. So if you're interested in checking out the discussion, we'll post the link in the chat. It definitely is very relevant for all the folks that have fleets in Oregon. And then for folks that have fleets in Washington, WashDOT will be launching their zero-emission commercial vehicle point-of-sale voucher program called WAZIP in 2026. Federally, there also are still some remaining incentive federal tax credits for businesses that are looking to install EVSE at their businesses. And we know that keeping track of all of these incentives can be really challenging. And so, if this is something that your organization is interested in, but you don't know where to start, we'd really encourage you to participate in the accelerator. It's a great way to get some hands-on support and come up with a plan and get some support going after those incentives. All right. Well, next, I will hand it off to Marissa Nixon at the Environmental Defense Fund to dive deeper into the operating costs of different electric vehicle segments.
Awesome. Steven, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa with the Environmental Defense Fund. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the total cost of purchasing and owning an electric truck. I know that keeping up with the alternative fuel market can feel a little bit like you have to keep your finger on the pulse 24/7. So at EDF, we're hoping to make that a little easier for you by providing content like this that demystifies the process of implementing electric solutions. We work with fleets, policymakers, businesses, and other decision makers to learn what we can do to support decarbonization across the transportation industry and get those solutions into your hands. My contact information will be at the end, and I'll talk a little bit about one of the ways we can help you with transitioning your fleet at that time as well. Awesome. So to start off, we have electrification and long-term savings. There's a lot of discussion in the EV space about whether electric trucks are actually a better value than their legacy fuel counterparts. Electric vehicles are often praised for their lower fuel and maintenance cost, which many folks claim balances out the higher purchase price. But is this claim true? The initial sticker shock can be a huge hurdle for fleets to overcome, especially if they're just starting their electrification journey. If we dig deeper into the economic arguments behind electric, we'll find that this claim is often true, and many of these trucks are actually cheaper over the course of their useful life. So, what are the economic advantages? Electric trucks do accumulate lower costs in several areas, making them the long-term cheaper choice. Almost unilaterally, EVs will observe lower fuel costs due to rising diesel prices and significantly lower electricity prices. And additionally, with less moving parts, EVs almost always observe lower maintenance costs. Recently, we've seen an uptick in operations and labor costs for diesel vehicles as well. So that's another big one to consider. Depending on the use case for the truck, there might be additional savings, but the three that I mentioned just a moment ago apply to nearly all types of EVs. However, you can't go to your colleagues and justify buying an electric truck just because you heard it was cheaper on a webinar. So what tools are available to justify the decision and put real data into your hands? This is where a total cost of ownership model comes in. For those that don't know, a total cost of ownership, or a TCO model, is a calculation to assess the expected cost of a vehicle over its useful life. There are a lot of different tools out there, and I'll go over some options later. But a TCO model will look at a lot of different factors. The model I will be discussing today includes the following factors: vehicle depreciation, financing, fuel, maintenance, insurance, license and registration costs, and operational costs. All right, so I've prepared a TCO model for a heavy duty refuse truck, a medium duty box truck, and a light duty pickup truck using data from Washington State. Across all three use cases, you can see there are savings ranging from 8% to 35% over the life of the truck compared to their diesel or gasoline counterparts. Large trucks have potential for significant savings, especially in this example, and smaller, lighter duty trucks can accumulate significant savings as well across the fleet as you're able to incorporate more of them into your operations. The model I'll be using today is called A-Fleet. It's from the US Department of Energy. I'll talk a little bit about the different options for TCO calculators at the end, because you will get slightly different outcomes across models, just depending on where they're getting their information. But like I said, I'll talk about that a bit at the end. The A-Fleet model is considered pretty standard throughout the industry, and you'll get a good industry average what to expect price-wise from this model. All right, so if we dig into refuse, you can see significant fuel savings in yellow on the figure. You do see that higher depreciation price, which is a measure of purchase price of the vehicle and infrastructure versus the resale value, but you've got a total difference for the truck of about $100,000 over the life of the vehicle. Refuse in particular is well suited for electric due to fixed route schedule and high braking rate, but that can be true for many use cases across fleets. I always suggest that folks look at what makes them unique and if electric can benefit those operations right now if they're looking to start electrifying a fleet with several different use case options. So here's the cost breakdown for each category that we've been discussing so far. As I mentioned a moment ago, you do see that higher depreciation cost, but if you look at the total ownership, the EV is significantly less expensive in the long run. Small things like diesel exhaust fluid and other operational costs really start to add up when you're looking at these large trucks. And here's the example for the medium duty box truck. As you move down in gross weight rating, you start to see a lower depreciation cost that can make the smaller trucks more competitive right off the bat. You also start to see really high fuel savings here. You can see the difference in that yellow on the figure again. Many medium duty trucks benefit from urban delivery routes, which are well suited for EV operations. You also see less upfitting and associated costs here compared to something large like the refuse truck that has a lot of moving parts that you have to figure out how that fits into the electric system as well. Here's the cost breakdown for that medium duty box truck. You've got a similar savings percentage here compared to the refuse vehicle. The depreciation price is definitely still expensive up front, but you're starting to creep down into more manageable range as we look at the lighter vehicles. One thing I encourage fleets to consider that isn't reflected in this TCO is right sizing your vehicles. If there are trucks available that are cheaper over the course of their lives and can still get the job done, even if it's not what you have typically been using for that specific use case, it can make for a really compelling argument to switch to electric. And then finally, we have some data for a light duty work truck. This is where you can really start to see those fuel savings rack up across the entire fleet. Many TCO models have areas where you can customize the number of trucks or any of the assumptions that I've listed. So you can make a totally custom cost analysis that will demonstrate where you'll be able to save money and bring those fleet costs down. One benefit of the light duty trucks is that right now they're generally more accessible because they've been around for a little bit longer. And you'll sometimes see a lower upfront cost compared to other use cases just because they have been on the market for a bit longer. Here is the data for that light duty truck. And you start to see a smaller gap in the TCO as you move down in weight class. But as I've said a few times, you can see the significant savings across the fleet as you're able to invest in many vehicles compared to just one or two of those larger trucks. Great. Okay, one thing I haven't talked about yet is incentives. Steven was talking about this a moment ago. but none of the calculators included in this none of the calculations included in this presentation factor in any grant assistance you may receive or any other incentives. So the TCO for your organization may continue to be more beneficial with additional funding. A lot of grants provide support for purchase of vehicles, so you can bring that depreciation number down a lot, which is one of the most significant barriers to entry, and that makes the economic argument even stronger. There are still some federal incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act that won't expire until mid-2026. So I encourage you to look at your options if you're further along in the process and are thinking about purchasing a truck soon. Many states also have incentives programs that will be more stable than the federal programs, so please look into specific options for your area to help bring that purchase price down. The final thing I'd like to talk about today are options for performing a TCO analysis. There are several good models out there available for free, but they do have different functionalities. When choosing a model, you'll want to consider a few things, the first being ease of use. A-Fleet, which is the model we use today, has a web portal that is very simple and user-friendly, as well as an Excel version for deeper analysis. This can be a really good starting point if you're just diving into the world of TCO. I've seen models that use their own software and some that run on Python, so you'll just want to play around with your options and figure out what you like best. I mentioned earlier that not all models include the same criteria, but not all criteria are created equal for all fleets. It's important to identify which metrics are most important for you and find a model that reflects those criteria. Last thing is that you want to be aware of any product biases. If you do a blanket Google search for TCO, you'll come across a lot of models that are promoted by companies that are selling a product. These models can definitely still be good, but you'll want to make sure that you're getting unbiased information and not specific product recommendations. I've included a list of popular models on this slide. They're all a little different, so I recommend trying out a few to see what you like. A-Fleet is probably the most popular, and I always recommend starting with this one. The Electrification Coalition's Drive tool gives you a one-to-one comparison between diesel and electric or hybrid models, which is unique. I know a lot of people really like that for the custom recommendations that make additional research really easy. There are other models such as the NREL model that dive a little bit deeper, and you can also find specific models for your state, such as the California HVIP calculator. As I mentioned, there are some product-specific TCO calculators available that can still be valuable. Just be aware of where the information is coming from. My biggest piece of advice when selecting model is just to be aware of where the information is coming from, as I said, and making sure that it fits your needs as a fleet. Thank you. That's all I have for you on TCO today. I did want to highlight just quickly, EDF has a few resources that can help you with this and other aspects of getting your fleet electrified. Our Climate Core Fellowship Program trains graduate level students and pairs them with companies and public institutions that are dedicated to meeting their climate and energy goals. Fellows spend a summer designing tools and recommendations to accomplish emissions reduction goals by road mapping climate commitments, reducing energy consumption, electrifying fleets, and engaging with suppliers. The deadline to apply for a 2026 Summer Fellow is actually next Friday, so it's a little tight, but we're also happy to talk with you about the program in general and get you on the list for future Climate Core opportunities as well. You can find my contact information on this slide, so please feel free to shoot me an email about the presentation or about Climate Core. And thanks so much to Breaking Barriers Coalition for putting this together today, and thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Marissa. We will transition over to Stevn Clem shortly, but I want to just say that we are flying through this. We're quite a bit ahead of schedule. So if folks have questions that they want to add to the chat, we'll be doing the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions for myself or Marissa or Steve, feel free to add them now, and we'll get back to them after Steve's presentation. All right. Take it away, Steve.
All righty. Well, thank you again for this opportunity to share what we've been up to over here at Skanksa. We are, proud alumni of the program of the Fleet Accelerator program. We participated in the winter of 2024, and you'll see some pictures. So if we go to the next slide. What I'm going to be sharing with you today is one of the strategies that we used to deploy our program. You heard from Marissa, there's always lots of questions. Some of them are, as big as like, does this even make sense, or why are we doing this, down to very specific instances with the use case. So I'm going to try to cover the whole gamut, and I'll do it as quickly as possible, and totally open to questions. So um, I mentioned the program we participated in. Uh, this is a picture of one of our first electric vehicles in our fleet, the Ford F-150 Lightning. It's actually taken there at the aquarium in Seattle, where we attended the accelerator in-person launch. The question is, why? Well, we have approximately 350 vehicles in our fleet. You heard, the accelerator serves people of fleets from 1 to 10,000 or more. We heard from one of those folks in the city of New York, and I'm just glad we don't have that many vehicles. But we report our emissions, our scope 1 and 2 emissions, to um, publicly. We've made commitments on those to reduce that emission, scope 1 and 2, by 70% over 2015 baselines by 2030, and that's coming up, very quickly, faster than you'd think. And the vast majority of those scopes in 1 and 2 fuels usage comes from these vehicles that are driving around on the roads every day. So our goal is to meet that 70% by transitioning our fleet to the next generation of zero emission vehicles. And you can see there that we've diversified a little bit in the last year. We've got the Ford, and on the right we have the Chevy Silverado, and we're testing out anything that works. So if we go to the next slide, we made a statement here. You can see on the date up there that's about 3 months ago, where after lots of talking about it, we finally made a decision and a mandate from the very top from our COO and also in strict line with our business unit president, saying we have these impacts, we have these goals, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to any new vehicle we purchase is going to be electric, and so that sets the tone and the conversation going forward. Before then, it was voluntary, optional. With some things that works. It didn't prove to be the case with this transition. People were very obviously stuck, but they were accustomed to how they'd always been doing it. So this mandate gave a lot of momentum and air cover to the conversations that the team needed to have with the projects. Go to the next slide, Steve. So this is this slide speaks a little bit to what Marissa was saying about, right sizing the vehicles. We have, the first idea was, well, just one for one, right? We've got pickup trucks, and so we'll replace them with pickup trucks, and that would be like, the Ford, with the Ford and all the same functionality. We do have people that use the pickup trucks for their utilitarian purposes. We have some that don't. We have other staff that aren't superintendent types, that are more environmental health and safety, or others that have vehicles. And so we can look for different solutions for them that have a lower price point, but also have a similar reduction in fuel. The bottom line is we're looking for that overall fuel consumption to go down, and not to get a certain type of vehicle or a certain brand. And so we also are open to, high mileage, high MPG hybrids that will be a step above what we're currently doing, potentially as a transitional vehicle. We looked at the hybrids in the pickup trucks, but the vast majority of our demographic drives considerable distances, and a lot of that's highway miles. And so in that case, the hybrid and the standard pickup truck from Ford get almost essentially the same mileage. So we made a decision to only target the midsize hybrid and then electrify the full size. So we can go to the next slide. Obviously a big component of making a transition like this is everybody knows where the gas station is. A lot of these superintendents and other users of these vehicles were also given a fuel card, so it was very simple. I mean, they did have to go to a fuel type depot where they would, it wasn't just any corner gas station, but they would swipe their card, pretty painless for them. And it also made it easy for us to track because we would get a report from that fuel supplier every quarter. So we had to match that somehow in ease and benefits. And so in partnership with sometimes our job sites, sometimes our customers, our main offices, also with incentives that are available through utilities, we developed some charging strategies. We're trying to avoid any of sort of the level one because it's frustrating for people who are new to the EV world that I can get 1 mile per hour, which you talk about a 300-mile range, and that's a lot of hours that you're going to spend. Typically, just use those for emergencies. What we've been doing is providing the level 2 charging at people's homes that have received the vehicles, and this is just a cost of making the transition. And when we do the total cost of ownership, it's figured in that original cost. Fast charging is reserved for trips between offices where we would then use a network. And now that the networks are fairly open to lots of different makes and models, it makes it pretty straightforward. And all these vehicles, we can use telematics that are associated with the VIN number. So even if you have a home charger and you plug in your company-owned truck and then you plug in your own EV, only the kilowatts that are used in the VIN, that are associated with the VIN that we own, get rolled up into our reports that we then reimburse for. So next slide. So the way that we've typically deployed vehicles in the past has a lot to do with just sort of seniority and title and other things that are not related to potentially what type of charging infrastructure you had, right? That was not a consideration in whether or not you got the newest pickup truck. And so we've had to rethink some of that. And, obviously, well, let me just say that the pickup truck is a rite of passage for a construction superintendent. It is a symbol of reaching a position at which you are given one, and so having the vehicle, having it look a certain way, operate a certain way, is all part and parcel with the sort of construction mystique. And so as we make this transition, we had to be sensitive to those conversations. So not everybody really would be jumping at the chance. But also, you could be a senior superintendent. You could be really on board with making the transition to a cleaner vehicle, but you could live in a fancy condo downtown and not have any access to infrastructure, so you might not be a good candidate. Someone who is more junior, but also lives in a little bit more rural setting with maybe they've got a welding setup in their shop where they can plug right in, they may be a better candidate. And we need to roll out the trucks to folks who are going to use them, be able to utilize them effectively, and so that's an important consideration. And the number one consideration on charging is have a plan before you start receiving the trucks, um, because what ends up happening is um, you can hand out the trucks before you have a charging plan, and if you do that, there's likely to be some dissatisfaction, some surprises, some unforeseen situations that um, may delay your implementation because people will give negative feedback on the experience. And then lastly, on charging, make sure people are aware of the different public options that uh, exist out there and the different rates at which they charge and just some of the nuances and adapters and that thing. So go to the next slide. Um, I mentioned this a little bit, but the trucks, even prior to the prior to being electric, a lot of the fleet vehicles had adopted onboard telematics, which basically means that they are able to report their usage, their mileage, that type of thing. And you can see here from a driver reimbursement report, we obviously got rid of the driver's name and the ID number, but this was a vehicle that you can see there the energy consumed and then how much we reimbursed. That rate is based on the utility rate that they have at the location, which is charged, in this case, their house. So that's how that works, and it is pretty straightforward. I mean, obviously it's competing with swiping a gas card, so it has a one additional step of reimbursement, but there's very little for the employee to do. So, and they don't have to drive to the gas station. So, next slide. This slide is sort of a corollary to the overview that Marissa gave earlier. These were some calculations that we did to satisfy ourselves on we knew that if we could reduce the fuel, then that was going to get us to our climate goals. But the way these vehicles work in a company like ours is that we purchase the vehicles, we pay the full price, and they're owned by a captured or wholly owned rental company that then leases the trucks to our projects. And so, we need to figure out the overall cost to lease these vehicles to our projects and how they differ from a traditional ICE vehicle. And so we looked at it, obviously the whole fleet, but we looked at it just one vehicle versus another vehicle. And some of this is made a little bit more challenging by the trim kits, because what's difficult sometimes to do is compare apples to apples. Like for instance, we might not buy four-wheel drive standard on pickup trucks in California, but you buy an EV, it comes with four-wheel drive. Now, is that how do you account for that cost? Is that like that's a value add, or is that just something you get free with purchase? So you have to think about those things. But you can see here that the fuel cost is the big driver in the savings, and we can also charge the project slightly more for these vehicles because they are they are cleaner, they are better. They are all sorts of things, faster, safer. in a lot of situations more comfortable. And so we did a survey of other rental agencies that have large fleets, um, and showed that increase was justifiable, and so that figured into our total cost of ownership as well. So, and then as we've deployed the trucks, and we see them driving around, and the best um, uh, feedback, or the best testimony we can get, is that from the drivers. And so we deployed the first of the vehicles and kept our fingers crossed, and started to get some good reports. And so on the next page, we captured some of that in and said, if you want to flip to the next one, Steve, that a couple of folks, one of them who is a senior superintendent, one who's a EHS manager, and you can see the unfiltered comments here. And you can see some of the things that are not related to whether it's gas or electric. The ride is smooth, acceleration, the frunk, people appreciate the frunk, and obviously on a construction site you do have the additional benefit of onboard power, where you could power different tools or lights or things like that, in case you needed to do that. So we've also begun to electrify our job sites with more heavy duty equipment, and hybrid equipment, and we've also placed charging stations on our project sites. So even if the superintendent or the driver couldn't charge fully at their house, they could charge during the day at the job site. So, and then finally, on the last slide, Steve, we attempted to sort of preempt some of the yeah buts that come out about the vehicles. Trust me, I've heard all of these from my father-in-law. So, but we just had two here. One of which is about electricity, and yes, it isn't a completely neutral equation, right? So you remember I started off talking about the scope 1 and scope 2. Scope 1 is the fuel, scope 2 is electricity. So obviously we're using more electricity, and we report that. However, for us, the vast majority of our fleet is in the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest has a highly renewable and clean fuel mixture that's going into the electrical generation, and so it's a net benefit for the planet, and for us. And also, the thing about electricity, obviously, and the reason it's scope 2 is because the generation is somewhere else, right? But if you're driving a combustion vehicle on site, that particulate pollution is right there on site. And so not only are we taking advantage, in most cases, of fairly clean electricity, we're also eliminating that particulate pollution at the job site level. So that's great. And then safety, construction safety is one of our core values, and so we wouldn't want to put folks in vehicles that are less safe than any other option. And we just wanted to make it clear that the safety requirements. Some of the safest vehicles that are rated on the road today are EVs, and that they perform very well. They have a very low center of gravity. There's less rollover accidents, all sorts of things. They're obviously they're not completely immune to collision and battery rupture and a fire, but um, in comparison to a vehicle that's traveling around with 20 gallons of fuel, explosive fuel inside, that the risks are pretty similar. So um, I guess in summary, this has been a journey for us. I mean, when 2 years ago at this time, we had 0 EVs, and we really didn't have a plan on how we were going to get them. Um, and we ended up getting a call from a dealership that said, we've got 4 that someone else canceled, and do you want them? And we said, sure. And then we got them, and then we're like, oh no, now what do we do? And luckily, the next month we were starting in the in the accelerator program with the Breaking Barriers Collaborative, and we were able to roll them out in a meaningful way. And then using the learnings there and some of our peers and the demand that's grown by others asking for them within our industry, we're able to then go out and add. By the end of the year, we should have about 15 or 16 vehicles now. Again, we're still working towards potentially 70 or 80 by 2030, which we're now on track to do. And we'll continue to adapt and change our plan and help our team make this transition. So that's all I have for today, Steve. Oh, sorry. Last one was just that it's always good to have somebody to call, and so um, you know we published our network of team members on our sustainability team, but in fact, there's just 2 or 3 of us who deal specifically with the vehicles. Um, but giving folks a resource and making sure your organization has the people that are in that leadership role or in that sort of being called to answer these questions, have the appropriate training, have been to the have the resources and the experience in order to help guide the process. So now I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. That was a great presentation. And as always, we appreciate the shout out for the accelerator. And, it just sounds like it couldn't have been better timing. So before I dive into answering questions, I'm going to leave all of our contact information on the slide deck on the screen for just a little bit. And then I'll stop sharing this screen and we'll move into questions.
Looks like there's a couple in the chat.
Perfect.
First one says, from Ashley, says, how long did the rollout of this plan take with Skanksa? I would say that the first time our climate plan said we were going to purchase electric vehicles was 2020. And we had baselined our emissions in 2015. So it took about 5 years to sort of even just get to the point where we were tracking and had a good idea. When we said we were going to do EVs in 2020, we were struggling with availability. And then, like I mentioned, it wasn't until the end of 23 that we got our first vehicle. So we talked about it and tried for 3 years, and then we got them. And then in the 2 years since then, it's accelerated and to where we are today. But we, again, it's a long-term plan. It's a plan to get to 2030, and then we'll need a few more years after that. The next question was about with the EV being charged at employees' homes. Is that still something Skanksa includes in its GHG inventory? Yes. we don't include employee travel in employee-owned vehicles to and from the job site, but we do include um, the fuel expended in employee-owned vehicles, regardless of where they're going, where they start, where they finish. Yeah.
And Steve, you've got another question. So what's the bigger challenge, vehicles or infrastructure? What are your plans to electrify larger assets?
Hmm. Um, I'll take that like in two parts. The first part with the bigger challenge. I think it's evolving pretty quickly. I think a few years ago I would have said infrastructure. And we heard about this blue oval network, and there was charging. Tesla said we've got plans to put in a charger on every corner, but they only worked with Teslas, right? And so now that network has been opened up, that's making the infrastructure easier. I mean, we have a charge at home model. There are lots of fleets that have you know, a depot model where the trucks come back to a certain location, central location. Um, and there's a lot more cost investment in a sort of a charging depot. There are different incentives and things for those, but that has not been our challenge. And so that infrastructure piece initially was the biggest challenge, and now it's getting less. Availability, it seems like every day you hear that EVs are the future, and then the next day you hear that they're being discontinued. And so it's difficult to, as a champion for a initiative like this, where everybody has the same access to news and social media, it's difficult to sort of wade through that and be like, well, uh, yeah, there are some challenges with, especially now, with reduced uh, focus on environmentally friendly policies and incentives in the current administration that have changed the math a little bit, or the incentives. And so um, it, it it's gonna time will tell. But right now we are we are still able to get the vehicles and to at a pace that makes sense. Like, the other thing I didn't mention is that we have a normal turnover of vehicles. Obviously, those trucks don't last forever, and so it makes sense to to phase out the ones in the fleet that are older. Um, because if we do it sooner, then there's you know um, we might not get our full investment back out of them. And so if we accelerate that turnover to meet some climate targets, then obviously we would incur costs there that we weren't anticipating. So, and then the last one is, the way our reporting works. This is similar to the conversation about employee-owned vehicles versus company-owned vehicles. Is that um, our current under the current GHG protocol reporting for scope 1 and 2. Um, the larger equipment in our business model that we subcontract out to one of our trade partners is not part of our inventory, um, and it's not part of our reporting. It would be part of their reporting, and it'd be part of their A4, A5 that would go into sort of the scope 3 impact of them providing that material on site. And so that, but we have partnered with Volvo. We're two great Swedish companies, Skanksa and Volvo, to look at the first electric full-size excavator. And so that was piloted in California last year. We've switched to um, some hybrid battery and diesel generators that run some of our temporary offices. We've got solar and hybrid light towers, uh, and that is moving slower than the light duty or medium duty vehicles, but it is catching up a little bit. Um, and where we can't make transition to electric, we are focusing on renewable diesel in the interim.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I actually have two questions, one for each of you. So I'll start off with Marissa. So just kind of going off of what Steve was talking about with having, a excavator that was all electric. I'm curious if there are other, examples of vehicle segments, it could be on-road or off-road, that have been performing really well and that you've seen promising TCO from. I know for this presentation, we could only kind of keep it to three main data sets. So off the top of your head, any segments that you're excited about?
Um, the first thing that comes to mind, definitely delivery vans. And this is a little bit off of the TCO thing, but for those that don't know, I am located in Minnesota. It has been about -10 degrees the past couple of days in the mornings, and those Amazon Rivian vans are out doing their Christmas runs with. It doesn't look like they're struggling that much. So really excited about the cold weather application there, and as well as the TCO for those. We did talk about refuse, but that's kind of my pet project a little bit. I love refuse vehicles, so I could talk about those all day, and I do genuinely think that they are very promising. Um, and I think the last one is honestly maybe utility vehicles, kind of like bucket trucks and those type of vehicles that anything that has a fixed route. I guess a bucket truck's not a great example of a fixed route, but those smaller routes where you can kind of plan it out a little bit more in advance. I think long haul is going to see some of the more significant challenges, but anywhere with like a local delivery route, it just makes those fuel savings really easy to quantify and look at when you know exactly your driving schedule, things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that example. And I've seen, bucket trucks where they also have just the electrified bucket part, and then, it's the normal truck. Um, and the last, so I used to work for utility, and we had one of those, and it was pretty much only used in urban areas, and it got really great feedback from all of the customers in the areas that it was working because the truck would be off. And then they would be using the bucket truck, for however many hours, but the local residents wouldn't hear much. So not only is it zero emission, but it's much, much quieter. So those applications are exciting for a lot of reasons. Um, all right, Steve, I got another question for you. Um, so I'm curious what your customers think about Skansa's commitment to going electric. Are they supportive? You mentioned being able to charge customers a premium to have an electric truck on their project.
Hmm. Yeah, it depends on the customer. And in some cases they may be aware of the premium. In other cases, it's part of a lump sum price that um, isn't there's not, they don't necessarily have visibility to, um, depending on how our contracts are structured. Um, but in general, they're appreciative of these types of moves that we make because it does reflect on them. I mean, we're guests usually on their property or on their campus or in their facilities for the duration of our projects. And, much like your comment about, an idling, you know, uh, bucket truck outside of your house for 8 hours, um, you know, our our trucks driving around, um, you know, with less emissions, quieter, um, is always preferable. We try to try to blend into the background as much as possible. Um, and um, they also appreciate their sort of value chain, beginning to think more about reducing our emissions because you know ultimately that all figures into um, their decision to start a project. And if they um, a lot of our tech customers have voluntary um, commitments that they've made. Um, I mean, they're voluntary, they're public, and at some point they no longer become voluntary because the everybody starts to expect them. And so we are we are doing um, these types of things and more on their projects in order to help them meet their goals.
Right on. Yeah, definitely sounds very mutually beneficial. So that's awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any new questions coming through the chat. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up a little early. But I really want to just thank you, Marissa, for being here. Steve, incredible. Really appreciate this partnership with you two. We'll be sharing out this recording of the webinar. Um, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, thank you all for attending. Really appreciate it. All right. Have a great rest
Thanks.
of your day.
Thanks a lot.
Everyone, goodbye.